I was sitting at my desk, the glow of 3 monitors illuminating my face, when the calendar notification popped up in the corner of my screen, vesting cliff, 3 days. I allowed myself a rare smile. In exactly 72 hours, the 4 years of sleepless nights, missed birthdays, and relentless coding would finally pay off. My stock options would vest, turning my paper equity into $10 million of real wealth. I wasn't doing it for the Ferrari, I was doing it for the freedom. I had built the core engine of Streamline from scratch in a garage, and this was the finish line. Suddenly, the glass door to my office swung open. I spun around, expecting a high five from my co-founder, Jasper. Instead, Jasper walked in flanked by 2 large security guards I had never seen before. He wasn't smiling. He was wearing his investor face, cold, detached, and ruthless. "We're letting you go, Felix," he said, checking his watch like he had a lunch reservation to get to. Effective immediately. I sat there, stunned, my brain struggling to process the input. "What, Jasper, are you joking? My stock vests on Friday. In 3 days." Jasper shrugged, adjusting his expensive cufflinks. "That's exactly why we're doing this today, Felix. We need that equity back in the pool for the new Series B investors. It's just business. Hand over your badge." As the guard stepped forward to grab my arms, I realized this wasn't a layoff. It was a robbery. 3 hours later, I was sitting on the floor of my messy apartment, staring at a single cardboard box. That box contained my entire career. I felt a mix of hollowness and blinding rage. They had erased me. 4 years of building the most advanced compression algorithm in the market, and I was discarded like a used battery 3 days before payday. The humiliation burned in my chest. I wanted to scream, but I didn't have the energy. In a fit of sudden anger, I kicked the cardboard box across the room. It hit the wall and tipped over, spilling my belongings everywhere. A framed photo of the original team shattered. Pens rolled under the sofa. And a beat-up, coffee-stained notebook slid across the floorboards. I recognized it immediately. It was from the garage days, 5 years ago, before we had an office or funding. I picked it up, flipping through the pages of scribbled code and diagrams. A single, folded sheet of paper fell out from the back pocket. It was the original partnership agreement Jasper had typed up on his laptop one night when we were drunk on cheap beer and dreaming of success. We couldn't afford lawyers back then, so Jasper wrote it himself. I unfolded the paper, reading the jagged text. When I got to paragraph 4, my heart stopped. I drove to a strip mall on the edge of town to meet Mira. She wasn't a high-powered corporate attorney with a glass office, she was a friend from college who handled estate law and divorces. But she was the only lawyer I could afford now that I was unemployed and broke. I slapped the wrinkled piece of paper onto her desk. "Is this worth anything?" I asked, my voice shaking. "Or is it just a souvenir?" Mira put on her glasses and read the document. She frowned, then read it again. Then, a slow grin spread across her face. "Jasper wrote this?" she asked. "Yeah," I said. "He wanted to protect the company's assets before we incorporated. He did the opposite." Mira laughed, tapping paragraph 4. "Listen to this. Until the codebase is fully migrated to a Series A entity, the creator, that's you, Felix, retains full copyright ownership of the source code." I looked at her, confused. "So, Felix," she said, her eyes wide, "did you ever sign the migration paperwork when you got funding?" "No," I realized. "We were too busy coding. We forgot." Mira leaned back in her chair, cackling. "That means Streamline, a company about to be valued at billions, is running on software that you legally own. They are squatting in your house." I went home with a plan. Mira wanted to sue immediately, but I still had a shred of hope that Jasper was a decent human being buried under the CEO persona. Maybe the pressure of the investors made him snap. I decided to give him one chance to fix it without burning the world down. I drafted a formal, polite letter. I didn't ask for the $10 million anymore. I didn't ask for my job back. I simply asked for the vesting schedule to be honored as originally promised. I attached a photocopy of the old garage contract with paragraph 4 highlighted in yellow highlighter. I wrote, "Jasper, let's resolve this quietly. Honor the deal and I'll sign over the IP rights properly." I sent it via registered mail. I sat by the window, watching the mail truck drive away, knowing that I held the detonator to his entire empire in my hands. I hoped he would be smart enough not to make me press the button. But deep down, I knew Jasper. He didn't negotiate with people he considered beneath him. My phone rang the next morning. It was Jasper. I answered, expecting a negotiation. "Are you insane?" Jasper shouted. There was no hello, no apology. Just pure aggression. "I got your little ransom note. That napkin is worthless, Felix. It wouldn't hold up in a small claims court, let alone against my legal team." "It's a binding contract, Jasper," I said calmly. "You wrote it." I was 22. He screamed. We have Wall Street lawyers now. Listen to me closely. If you try to enforce that scrap of paper, I will sue you for extortion. I will bury you in legal fees until you're homeless. I will make sure you never write a line of code in this industry again. So, that's a no. I asked. That's a threat, Jasper hissed. Go away, Felix. You're nothing. He hung up. The line went dead. I sat there, listening to the silence. He thought he was crushing a bug. He didn't realize he had just declared war on the architect of his own foundation. 2 weeks passed. I sat in my apartment, eating ramen, watching the news on my laptop. Suddenly, the breaking news banner flashed red. Tech giant, Streamline, announces IPO. My stomach dropped. They were going public. The news anchor was breathless with excitement. Streamline is set to debut with a valuation of $5 billion, she said. It is the most anticipated tech IPO of the decade. Then, the screen changed to show the cover of Forbes magazine. It was a black and white portrait of Jasper, looking visionary and serious. The headline read, "The sole genius behind the code." I read the article online. It was 5,000 words long. It mentioned the founding story, the garage, the late nights. But it mentioned me 0 times. I had been completely scrubbed from history. Jasper wasn't just stealing my money, he was stealing my legacy. He was selling my invention to the world and taking all the credit. The IPO roadshow, where they pitched the stock to big banks, started next week in San Francisco. I looked at my bank account. I had $12,000 left in savings. It was my emergency fund, meant to last me 6 months while I looked for a new job. I didn't hesitate. I transferred $3,000 to buy a ticket to the TechCrunch Disrupt conference in San Francisco, the first stop on Jasper's IPO roadshow. I went to my closet and pulled out my only suit, the one I wore to my sister's wedding. It was a bit tight, but it would have to do. I booked a cheap motel room outside the city. Mira told me I was crazy. She said we should file the lawsuit quietly. No, I told her. He threatened to bury me in private. So I'm going to bury him in public. I packed my bag. I took the original garage notebook, not a copy. I put it in a waterproof folder. I looked in the mirror. I didn't look like a founder anymore. I looked like a man with nothing left to lose. And that made me dangerous. The auditorium in San Francisco was packed. The air smelled of expensive coffee and ambition. Hundreds of bankers, investors, and journalists filled the seats, their laptops open, waiting to hear the pitch. The lights dimmed, and heavy bass music started playing. Jasper walked onto the stage like a rock star, wearing a black t-shirt and jeans. The crowd cheered. Streamline isn't just software, Jasper said, pacing the stage. It is the bedrock of the modern internet. Our proprietary technology is untouchable. It is a fortress that we own completely. He went on for an hour, showing graphs of revenue and growth. Finally, he opened the floor. Questions. I stood up in the middle of the room. I wasn't holding a microphone, but I projected my voice. Jasper, I shouted. He squinted into the darkness. Yes, you in the suit. A staff member handed me a mic. I took a deep breath. Jasper, you said the technology is untouchable. Does Streamline actually own the copyright to the source code, or does it still belong to the founder you fired last week to dilute the stock pool? The room went deadly silent. You could hear a pin drop. Jasper's confident smile faltered for a fraction of a second, but he recovered quickly. He let out a dismissive laugh. We have full ownership of all our IP. Next question. I didn't sit down. I held up the plastic folder containing the contract. I have the IP assignment agreement right here. I shouted, my voice booming through the speakers. You wrote it 5 years ago. It says I own the code until a transfer is signed. You never signed it. Cut his mic. Jasper screamed, losing his cool. 3 large security guards rushed toward my row. They grabbed me by the arms. I didn't fight back. I wanted the room to see this. As they dragged me toward the exit, I kept shouting. You're buying stolen goods. He doesn't own the product. Check the due diligence. The bankers turned around, whispering to each other. The journalists started typing furiously. Jasper stood on stage, pale and sweating. He had removed me from the room, but he couldn't remove the doubt I had planted. The security guards threw me out onto the concrete sidewalk. Don't come back, one of them growled. I dusted off my suit jacket and smiled. I had managed to hand physical photocopies of the contract to 3 people before I was grabbed. A reporter from the Wall Street Journal, a blogger from TechCrunch, and a junior analyst from Goldman Sachs. I went to a coffee shop and opened Twitter. It had already started. The TechCrunch blogger had posted a picture of the contract clause. Breaking, disgruntled founder crashes Streamline IPO roadshow claiming he owns the source code. Document looks authentic. The tweet had 5,000 retweets in an hour. The hashtag #WhoOwnsTheCode began trending. Jasper's carefully curated narrative of the sole genius was cracking. The market hates uncertainty, and I had just injected a lethal dose of it into his $5 billion party. By the time I got back to my motel, my email inbox was full. But not with job offers. It was another email from Streamline's legal team. This time, it was a formal cease and desist order. It was terrifying. It accused me of defamation, corporate espionage, and harassment. It demanded I surrender all documents and publicly retract my statements, or they would seek $10 million in damages. It was designed to scare me into silence. I called Mira. Can I post this? It's a letter sent to you, Mira said. It's your property. Do it. I took a screenshot of the legal threat. I posted it on Twitter with the caption, "They are scared of a piece of paper." If they owned the code, they would show the transfer document. Instead, they send threats. The internet loved it. It validated everything. Why would a billion-dollar company threaten her? Nobody, unless he was telling the truth. The Streisand effect took over. Now, everyone wanted to know what was in that contract. The fallout hit the boardroom the next morning. The lead bank underwriting the IPO, Morgan Stanley, got nervous. They couldn't sell stock to the public if there was a cloud over the intellectual property. They called Jasper. "We need a code audit," the head banker told Jasper. "We need to verify that the current codebase is distinct from what Felix claims to own." Jasper panicked. He knew he couldn't pass an audit. The entire platform was built on my architecture. He called an emergency meeting with the engineering team. "Rewrite it," Jasper ordered. "Rewrite the entire core engine. Change the variable names. Change the structure. Remove Felix's fingerprints. You have 48 hours. The engineers looked at him like he was crazy. "That's millions of lines of code," one said. "It's impossible." The current CTO was a woman named Priya. She had been my number 2 for years. She was brilliant, ethical, and the only reason the system ran smoothly after I left. She stood up in the meeting. "We can't rewrite it, Jasper. Felix's compression algorithm is the foundation. If we pull it out, the whole platform collapses. It's like trying to remove the cement from a skyscraper while people are living in it." Jasper's face turned purple. "I don't pay you to tell me what's impossible. I pay you to fix problems. Do it, or you're fired." Priya looked at him, then took off her badge. "I'm not destroying this product to save your bonus. I quit." She walked out. Jasper fired the rest of the senior engineers who agreed with her. In his desperation to hide my influence, he purged the only people left who understood how the system actually worked. The timing couldn't have been worse. The next day was the biggest live demo of the roadshow in New York City. Jasper was presenting to the top hedge funds. He was going to show off the real-time processing speed of Streamline. He clicked the button to start the demo. The screen froze. Without Priya or me to balance the server loads, the system destabilized under the stress of the rewrite attempts by the junior engineers. A spinning wheel appeared on the giant screen. Then, a fatal error message. The room groaned. Jasper tapped the laptop. "Just a Wi-Fi issue," he lied, sweat dripping down his forehead. "Give it a second." It didn't come back. The system had crashed. The investors checked their phones. The news of Priya's resignation had just leaked. The valuation estimates dropped from $5 billion to $4 billion in real time. That night, there was a knock on my motel room door. I opened it to find Jasper standing there. He looked terrible. His eyes were bloodshot, and he wasn't wearing his visionary, black t-shirt. He was wearing a rumpled hoodie. "Can I come in?" he asked. I stepped aside. He walked in and sat on the cheap bed. He pulled a checkbook out of his pocket. "Okay, you win," Jasper said, writing quickly. "This has gone too far. Here." He ripped out the check and handed it to me. It was for $500,000. "Sign the rights over. Take the money. Go away." I looked at the check. $500,000. It was life-changing money for a guy eating ramen. But it was 5% of what my stock was worth. It was an insult. "No," I said. "What?" Jasper snapped. "It's $500,000 cash. I want my shares, Jasper. All of them. And I want a public apology." Jasper stood up, tearing the check into pieces. "You'll get nothing. I'd rather burn the company to the ground than let you in." He stormed out, slamming the door. I called Mira immediately. "He's trying to bribe me. We need to stop the IPO before he scams investors." Mira filed a formal injunction in the Delaware Court of Chancery the next morning. Her argument was simple but devastating: selling shares in a company that does not own its core product constitutes securities fraud. Because we had the written contract, and because Jasper had publicly failed to produce a counter-document, the judge granted a temporary hearing. The gavel came down. The IPO was officially paused pending the investigation. The financial press went wild. Streamline IPO halted by founder dispute. It was the first time in history a fired engineer had stopped a multi-billion-dollar listing from a cheap motel room. The legal process moved into the discovery phase. This meant Jasper had to turn over his internal communications. He tried to fight it, but the judge ordered him to comply. I sat in Myra's office, sifting through thousands of printed emails. Most were boring, but then I found it. An email dated the day before my firing. It was from Jasper to the CFO. Subject, dilution strategy. The body read, "We have a problem. The Series B allocation is tight. If we fire Felix before Friday, we can absorb his 10% equity back into the pool and split it among the executive team. He's too passive to fight back. Let's cut him loose." I stared at the paper. It wasn't about performance. It wasn't about business needs. It was pure, calculated greed. He fired me to steal my shares for himself. I didn't wait for the trial. I scanned the email and sent it to the Wall Street Journal reporter I had met at the roadshow. The story ran on Sunday morning. The headline was brutal: greed at the top, leaked emails reveal CEO fired founder to steal equity. The public sentiment flipped instantly. Before, some people thought I was just a bitter ex-employee. Now, I was a martyr. The employees at Streamline, who had been watching their own stock options lose value, turned on Jasper. They started staging walkouts. They wore T-shirts that said, "I stand with Felix." The internal revolt was the final nail in the coffin of Jasper's control. The investment banks had seen enough. Morgan Stanley sent a formal letter to the board of directors. They were pulling out of the IPO. They refused to underwrite a company led by a CEO under investigation for fraud. Without the banks, there was no IPO. The valuation didn't just drop, it crashed. Secondary markets were now valuing Streamline at $1 billion, an 80% drop from the peak. The company was bleeding cash, the product was unstable, and the leadership was toxic. They were weeks away from bankruptcy. I was packing my bag to leave the motel when my phone rang. It was the chairman of the board of Streamline. "Felix," he said, his voice grave. "We need to talk." "I'm listening," I said. "We are calling an emergency meeting. We need to resolve the IP issue. Can you come in?" "I'll be there in an hour," I said. I didn't wear a suit this time. I wore my hoodie and jeans. I walked into the glass boardroom where I had been fired weeks ago. The entire board was there. Jasper was sitting at the far end, looking at the table. He didn't look up. "What will it take?" the chairman asked. "What will it take to sign over the IP so we can save the company?" Jasper suddenly stood up. "He's a terrorist," he screamed, pointing at me. "He's holding us hostage. We can't negotiate with him." "Sit down, Jasper," the chairman snapped. I looked at the board. "I don't want to sell the code," I said calmly. "I built it. It's mine. We can't run the company without it," a director said. "I know," I said. "So here is my offer. I will license the code to Streamline. You will pay me a royalty fee on every dollar of revenue. And I want my original 10% equity reinstated immediately, fully vested." Jasper laughed hysterically. "You think we'll agree to that? We'll just build a new system. We'll hire 1,000 engineers. We don't need you." I looked at him. It was time for the final card. The bluff. "You can try," I said. "But you should know something about the architecture. When I wrote the deep code in the garage, I built in a timestamp logic. It's a maintenance protocol. If the license isn't manually renewed by the original creator's cryptographic key every 5 years, the system assumes it's been stolen and encrypts the database." The room went cold. "That 5-year deadline," I said, checking my watch, "is tomorrow at noon." It was a lie. There was no kill switch. But Jasper didn't know how to code, and he had fired everyone who did. He couldn't risk calling my bluff. The chairman looked at me, then at Jasper. The fear in the room was palpable. If the system locked up tomorrow, the company was worth zero. "Jasper, please step outside," the chairman said. Jasper looked stunned. "This is my company. Step outside," the chairman repeated, harder. Jasper walked out, slamming the door. The board whispered for 5 minutes. Then they called me and Jasper back in. "Jasper," the chairman said, his voice flat. "We are accepting Felix's terms. We are reinstating his equity and signing the licensing deal." Jasper opened his mouth to argue. "And," the chairman continued, "we are accepting your resignation, effective immediately. Security is waiting to escort you out." I watched Jasper being led away by the same guards who had dragged me out. He looked small. He looked defeated. The lawyers drafted the paperwork right there in the boardroom. I signed the licensing agreement. I signed the vesting papers. I got my 10% equity back. It was worth much less now, maybe 20 million instead of 100, but it was mine. Plus, I had the licensing royalty, which meant I would get a check every month for as long as the company existed. I had essentially become the landlord of the software I built. A month later, Streamline finally went public. It wasn't the splashy, $5 billion debut Jasper had dreamed of. It was a humble, quiet listing. I stood on the balcony of the New York Stock Exchange. The new CEO, Priya, who the board had begged to return, stood next to me. She rang the opening bell. I looked down at the trading floor. The ticker symbol SDL flashed on the screens. I pulled out my phone and checked the news. The top story was about Jasper facing an SEC investigation for the email about stealing equity. He was facing fines and a ban from running public companies. I smiled, closed the old garage notebook that was still in my pocket, and walked into the crowd. I didn't bankrupt the company, but I bankrupted the man who tried to steal it. And that was enough.